and was shocked by what happened, what's going on, wanting to know where it's going to go. And the truth is, I really don't know what to say with any certainty because we don't have prophecy today. Once upon a time, we had prophets you could go to ask questions what God was thinking, why this is happening. David HaMelech, went and asked from the Urim and Tumim, the special breastplate that they call the Gadol wore with the different stones that would light up and give a message, also from a prophecy as well. Today, it's more like we learn things after the fact. We see what's going on. I've often compared it to an archer. When you have an amateur archer and you're trying to figure out what he's aiming at, the fact that he hit something doesn't mean that's what it was because he's not a professional, so it's very possible he could miss his mark. But a professional archer is somebody who doesn't miss his mark and he can stand off on an angle and he can't quite tell what he was trying to get. When he hit something, you knew that was the target. That's what he was aiming for because he wouldn't have missed otherwise. So there's no better archer in this respect than Hashem, than God Himself. And we can't anticipate what He's going to do next. We can't try to understand completely what He's doing and how He's doing it, why He's doing it. As the prophet Yeshaya told the Jewish people on behalf of Hashem, my thoughts are not like your thoughts, my ways are not like your ways, meaning that all the human logic in the world goes out the window when trying to understand what Hashem is doing, because His logic is divine logic. It's the most logical logic of all. Our logic is flawed because so often we base our assumptions and base our conclusions on incomplete information, incomplete evidence, and it looks one day like it's this, and the next day looks like that. So we only really see after the fact when something happens, when it results, when we see that what it leads to, then we can assume that was part of what was meant. Even for example, the fact that we, after going through a period of tremendous this unity, division in the country like never before since the beginning of the state. And all of a sudden, now we're talking about unity governments and people coming together. There's still hardline leftists and liberals and people who refused, even in this situation, refused to get on board. But a lot of other people, it's quiet. The argument, has quietened down. It might be taking place behind closed doors, but out in the open, you pay a price for disunity, a very serious price. To get Klal Yisrael to come together like this we couldn't do it. But this did do it. So it's like there's almost an equation here. There's just one idea, but you have to assume that to wonder this is it incidental or is it part of the whole thing? I don't know for sure, but certainly it's something to pay attention to. It's also interesting because we were saying LeDavid until from Rosh Chodesh Elul until the end of Hoshana Rabbah. We didn't say it for Shmini Atzeres. We're saying every day, twice a day, until Shmini Atzeres. We stopped at the last time was Hoshana Rabbah in the morning, and then Shmini Atzeres at nighttime. We don't say anymore, and that's when the attack took place. And it says, one of the lines, this year I actually spent a lot of time. I focused a lot. I actually wrote a little parish on LeDavid this year. And, one pasuk course, which is very important that we say all the time, and we're very familiar with it. And it says that David HaMelech says, he says, Im takum alai milchama bezos ani votech, right? If war will come to me, in this I trust. Acha shalti meis Hashem ha'osa evakesh, right? One thing I'm going to, I ask from Hashem, I request, Shifti beveis Hashem kol yimei chayai lechazis b'noim Hashem uvakir bechalo, right? That it should be that I should dwell in His house all the days of my life, and I should be able to see, right, the delight of Hashem, and to visit, to contemplate in His sanctuary. This is David's response to the idea of war. If it im takum, it's interesting language, you don't think about it that way. Im takum almost implies like a sudden attack, like you just got up, it is out of nowhere. Most wars don't work that way. You could see the development of the forces. They move up. There's movement, and there's tanks moving to the front lines, and all kinds of like activity that indicates something's up. Most of the wars that Israel has fought has been with advanced warning, either because of intelligence or because of what the other side was doing, or the threats that were being made, and we kind of like anticipated to a large degree. Even the Yom Kippur War, there was a lot of warning signs, and as far as I've read and recall, that we maybe could have anticipated and even defended ourselves before the war began. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Henry Kissinger told Golda Meir that if we did that, we'd be seen as the aggressor, and that would not be good for the Jewish people at that stage of history. So we had to just wait and see what's going to happen. But there was intelligence. This thing caught us completely by surprise. There was no defense in place at that time, and it took a long time to get down there and to respond to it. By the time they did, there were so many deaths and so many brutal acts had taken place already, injuries and infiltrations, mind-boggling. I cannot get my head around the numbers. Since I've been here, since I remember, I've never seen so many Jews die at one time, and so brutally reminiscent of the Holocaust itself. These are, make no mistake about it, these are Nazi prodigies. People don't realize necessarily that the Arab world, I mean, they were working together with the Nazis in World War II, and they were sharing information, and they learned a lot from the Nazis about propaganda. And so much, there's a reason why there's a resemblance between what they do today and what was done back in the 1930s, because they learned, they took it in, and same type of, even worse in some respects. There's no need to go into all the comparisons at this point in time, but it's just part of all the surprise, the haftarah that we had to deal with, and on Simchas Torah's Man Simchasenu, right? And it doesn't. It's not logical. I mean, World War I wasn't logical. World War II is not logical, because God has His plan. He's got the bigger picture, and we have certain things to look at and to learn from. We have prophecies, and we've spoken about, this whole program has been about preparing for redemption, and along the way, the war of Gog and Magog and how to avoid it, hopefully. And but these things have been looming. In fact, one of the things that always amazes me about physics, theoretical physics, is how they can work in such an abstract world, an abstract thought, and not even be sure really about what they're looking at and whether it's true and whether it makes complete sense, or it's just what makes sense for the time being. And somehow yet they're able to take whatever they come up with theoretically and apply it in the physical world and use it for some technological advancement. There's this crossover from the world of theory to the world of actuality, and it's amazing how they're able to do that. And in a sense, that's kind of what's going on right now. People talk about having emunah. You have to have emunah, but how many people actually have emunah? We know about emunah, we talk about emunah, we stress emunah, we give shurim emunah, but how many people actually have been put in a situation? Some individuals for sure. But the nation as a whole, since the Holocaust, since since the 73 war, perhaps we haven't been put in such a situation where we really had to have it again. It's been very theoretical. So much of our Yiddishkeit, so much of our Judaism, so much of our understanding what's supposed to happen historically has been very theoretical. And now it's becoming the Mises. Now it's becoming real. It's becoming more practical, so to speak. And so many people are finding out that that's all it was theory. The Gemara says an interesting thing. Gemara says that it's talking in Masechet Krisos, which deals with the different laws of excitation from the Jewish people, certain averas that get cut off, and it has a discussion about simanim. Right, it's actually talk about the theme that we're supposed to have on Rosh Hashanah, as to kick off the year and to try and get focused and draw down bracha. The Gemara says that simanim, they make a difference. They're not just like symbolic things, but they make a difference. So the Gemara has a few simanim that mentions, aside from Rosh Hashanah. For example, if a person is going to business, they want to know if they're going to succeed, they should do the following thing. Right, and if a person wants to know if they're going on a journey, if they're going to come back home again, they should do the following thing. They should go into the dark room. If they see the reflection of their shadow, the Gemara says, then they know they're going to come back. They can't. I don't exactly know what that means. Even how you go to the dark room and see anything for that matter. They perceive it. Not they see it. They perceive it. So maybe it's some spiritual reality that doesn't exist anymore at this time. But nonetheless, when the Gemara comes back and says, should a person really do this? Because if it turns out that they don't perceive what they hope to perceive, they're distraught. and they become distraught, then they can damage their muzzle. The Gemara brings another example, this idea of damaging muzzle. Gemara says in, I think it's Chagiga, one of those Masechtas there, where the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, sent his messenger to go get the soul of a particular woman. And he brought back the wrong one. The one he brought back wasn't supposed to die yet. The one they were supposed to get got the little. Well, I don't know. It doesn't say what happened. She probably got taken too. But eventually, he brought back the wrong one, right? And the Gemara questions: how is that possible? How is it possible that he could be successful? She wasn't meant to die. How could he take her soul? So the Gemara says that she was, I think, stoking a furnace, something like that. In those days, they cooked using a furnace. And she was stoking and she burned herself. And in the course of burning herself, she damaged her muzzle. And by damaging her muzzle, that made her vulnerable to the shliach of the Malach HaMavis, and she was able to die. So this idea of muzzle is a tricky idea. The Gemara talks about it as well. It's most of the time you use muzzle tov, is usually interpreted as good luck. But it's not. It's not about good luck. It's about, we don't even believe in luck at all. It's everything's hashgacha pratis. And it's all about spiritual realities and beings and how things are affected and how we affect them through what we do down here and how it affects our destiny, et cetera, et cetera. But this, we don't understand all of this necessarily. And we don't necessarily believe in all of this because whatever we our thinking is like. But in the world above, they do. And they know, and this is true. The angel of death, he knows the rules of creation. He's a completely spiritual being. He knows all the spiritual realities, and he takes advantage of our lack of understanding to trap us, to get us, either to do things or to become vulnerable in ways that otherwise we don't want to be vulnerable. And there's this behind the scenes reality that people don't take into account. It's difficult to fathom. And I just want to say that in about 5-10 minutes, I'm going to turn this over to questions and answers and then sum up towards because I'm sure people have specific questions they want to deal with, and rather than my just giving over information, if not, then I'll just keep going. But this way it gives people a chance to ask specific things. But I just want to make one particular point clear. We don't know where this is going to lead. We don't know what is going to happen as a result of this. Right now, it sounds good, but they're talking about, it sounds good. And it's better than it was a few days ago. It was better than when it first began. We seem to have no control of the situation. A lot of talk from the army and things like that, and they slowed down, but the army says they're slowing down, not because they're giving up, but because they're getting ready for a longer war. And we don't know what's going with Iran and Hezbollah, and but all of that is secondary. It's all secondary because whether a person believes it or not, the physical reality, the physical world is a function of the spiritual one. We can't get away from that. Just like, for example, quantum mechanics may be all theoretical and it's like so abstract, but it is describing the physical reality. This concept of entanglement when it comes to electrons and photons, things like that, and how Einstein was proven wrong that things can, information can travel faster than the speed of light, and et cetera, and we don't know. Are we right? Are we wrong? This is what we see so far, but it's describing the physical world, that the physical world eventually is a function of all of this. As theoretical and abstract as it might be, this very non-abstract reality is because of that. So the same is true. I'm a believer. I believe in hashgacha pratis. I believe in the material that I'm learning. But it's all very abstract. It's all very theoretical, and trying to bring the two worlds together at some point in time. The same way, for example, that in the beginning there was only Tanakh history. It was all biblical history. There's no secular history, so to speak. And people knew. They knew about God. Right? Egypt knew about God. Nebuchadnezzar knew about God of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. Josephus writes in his time, you could still see the pillar of salt that Lot's wife became, and Newton's student wrote about that in the 1700s. And he still believed and wondered about it, and countless stories. And he talks about how Josephus writes about how in his time, Roman times, way into history after Christianity had already begun, or before. Or at least it was before it was accepted and became the official religion of Rome. But it was a reality. And then, we had Hester Panim, and it got worse, and God hid himself, and then history split into two parts. You have Torah history, which kind of went underground. Right? Torah history means that we believe in the giving Torah Mount Sinai. We believe in the prophets. We believe in the prophecies about the end of days. We believe that we're supposed to be keeping the Torah the entire time, even though God doesn't talk to us for the longest time, but we're still obligated, and we believe that it's all leading towards its ultimate purpose. I mean, I sit there translating Kabbalah on a daily basis that's talking about the final end purpose, way past all of this, going way past the year 6,000, way past the year 7,000, way past 8,000, 9,000. It's like there's a whole period of time. It's just one little compact. It seems like everything because we're in it, but in the perspective of all of it, it's just another section of history that's been happening the entire time. But at some point in time, that's going to become clear to everybody. The Muslim Mashiach, the Messianic era, is going to they're going to merge once again. Because until now, secular history has been about what's gone on in the world, as you find in the history textbooks and secular schools the last couple of thousand years, and doesn't talk about the Jewish people per se necessarily, doesn't talk about God, doesn't talk about, all the things that it once did. And so man just forgot about all that and doesn't believe anymore because he becomes so distant from it. But at some point in time, it's going to emerge once again. It's going to come back. And that's what the war of Gog and Magog is for. At some point in time, if you're a believer and you believe in redemption, you have to understand at some point in time that God is going to reintroduce himself into history. It's not going to be an overnight process because people couldn't handle that. It's not like, oh, hi, God. We were wondering about you, and here you are. Look at that. Let's make a big party. It's like psychologically, there's a lot of people, good people, who have been misinformed, who built their lives upon the fact that God's not here, and the Torah is not from Sinai. And for them, like Joseph's brothers, the shock could kill them because all of a sudden to find out that your entire life is a mistake. So, God works a little bit more slowly and eases. Even religious people who think that they're real with the reality of God, they're not so real because we haven't had to be, or at least we haven't had the means to be, because it's all basically just us. We don't get to talk to God. You work really hard. You think you feel the presence of God and you feel close to him, and you do. But it's not like when God spoke to us through prophets and the temple had miracles taking place. It's a whole different era of history. And the more brazen we become and believing in our own sense of self and knowledge, the more difficult it is to connect to that and to believe in that. But at some point in time, that's all going to change. And the question is that now? Because it has to happen. In Egypt, we were there for 210 years. 116 years of that was slavery. This just got worse and worse and worse. And it was generations of Jews. And people must have thought, we're never going to get out. This is going on and on. Okay, so God said, they said they had the Torah that predicted to be 400 years. In the end, we got a bargain because people thought, 40 years, it was only 210. But it doesn't make it, you're living through it generation after generation. The average generation is going to be 30 years. So, it's 7 generations, basically, of Jews. So they had to give up. When Moshe came, they didn't believe it was going to happen. That's why we've been here for so long already. But it ended, and it did. And it was hard to comprehend, and it was hard to even leave. But it ended. And then we went to Babel for 70 years, not as long, but still a long time. And it seemed to go on forever. But it ended. And the Greek exile lasted 180 years. It didn't leave the land. It took place inside Eretz Israel, but it was oppression and exile. We couldn't serve God the proper way, didn't have control of our own land. And it must have seemed like it would never end. And it ended. And this one's been thousands of years, just over 2,000 years now. And it certainly seems like it's not going to end. Some people don't want it to end because they've been enjoying life at the end of exile here. We've had a good period of time, but it has to end. You have to, if you're a believer, you have to know. But it's like emotionally, it's hard to grasp that. It's hard to be real with that. So I just want to, before moving to questions and answers, just leave with one concept that is historically provable, but it comes from Kabbalah, and it's actually has a lot of applications. I found out more than I thought. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I've discussed it in the past a little bit. I have books talking about it, but this is just the basic idea. Kabbalah explains that when God made creation, he made something first, and then he broke it, and he built from the broken pieces. It's called Shviras HaKelim, the breaking the vessels. That's what Kabbalah calls it. It happened before what the Torah is talking about, although the Torah alludes to it, by the way. You just have to know how to read it. But if you read the Torah on a pshat level, simple level, the way it reads right now, then you don't see any reference to it. But actually, the second verse is really the first verse, according to Zohar, and then you do see reference because the tohu, the null and the void, and the chaos and all that has to do with the broken vessels from before. It's a long story, a couple of shir unto itself, and you can read about it. I think even the different books in English written about it, and it's there. And that's the way God made the world. So why do you do it? Why do you make a world and break it? So Kabbalah explains because we had to have evil. We had to have free choice. The whole point of creation was free will. You can't have free will. There's no choice. There's not a choice between good and good. It has to be between good and evil. So evil had to exist in some form, even if it's only fictitious. And it's not really real evil, but it looks like it's evil. But somehow it makes us have a choice. And to do that, he had to make something, break it, and then rebuild it. That's the way God did it. And it turns out this is an ongoing process. And you can even apply it to ourselves. On Rosh Hashanah Kippur, we break ourselves down. We also have our own personal Shviras HaKelim. The whole point of the Aseres Mechuvah, beginning back really from Elul's man, is to pull off the layers, to break yourself down, to break the vessel, so to speak. And on Sukkot, the joy, and why do you do this? Because you get to the essence of who you are. And that's extremely important because most people don't even know what it is because they get covered in so many different layers after so many years of life in the world around us. And then the building of the sukkah, which the Vilna Gaon says, the walls of the sukkah correspond to the body, and the person going into the sukkah is really like the soul going to the body. So that's supposed to be you in a metaphorical way. But what it represents is the idea of rebuilding yourself from scratch, from taking the broken pieces, so to speak, but rebuild yourself the proper way, according to who you are in essence. This idea runs all through the place, and one major place that it shows up, this is going way longer than 10 minutes, but it's worth it, I hope, is by the Holocaust. People often say that Eretz Yisrael today, the modern state, is built upon the ashes of the Holocaust. They don't know how true that really is. It's not just that because the Holocaust happened that the world had Rahmanas and voted in the UN to give us a homeland because Truman got into power and bent some, it's like, there's no question that's a major part of it, but Kabbalistically is much more than that. Because every single person who died in the Holocaust is an etzot, a holy spark. And that's the currency of the spiritual world. Things happen in the physical world. It's just like money makes the world go round physically. It's Netzotzi Kedusha sparks that make the world go round, period. Money's power is the sparks behind it, so to speak. So, in 1948, that was when God decided from creation that the Jewish people had to get back to their homeland, but we weren't ready for it. We didn't do what was necessary to bring it about. Now, if you were to ask anybody, was it worth losing 6 million people so cruelly to get back to the state? I don't think anybody. I would assume, none would say, yeah, sure, it's a fair cheshbon, it's a fair calculation. But no, I think most people would say, listen, we've been in exile already a long time, but to save 6 million people, we'll stay there a little longer until we can get it without having to pay so many people. But that's not the way it worked. You have a question? You have to ask God why he thought it was worth it, why he said it had to be done that way. No idea. No idea. I just know that's what happened. That's you can't argue with the facts. That's a history, and literally built. All those sparks. The ashes, the physical ashes, stayed there, but the sparks that were those souls left, came to Israel, became the basis of getting the land, keeping the land, developing the land, because that's what makes the world work. That you can't do anything in this world without sparks. Same way you can't get things for free. You have to pay for them. You have to have money, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Even if you think you're getting a free lunch, you're not. It's going to come back someplace else because there's nothing in this world for free. You can't see how all the time, but that's the rule of creation. So you have to be very careful. If you think you're getting something for free, be very careful because it can come back later on and cost you a lot more with interest. Same thing. Getting back Eretz Yisrael as part of the Gula process It was necessary. It had to happen. It was nigzar. It was the creed going back to creation itself. There's no surprises for God. For us, yes, not for God. What's the cheshbon? No idea. No idea. That God will have to explain to us later on. But that's the idea. Before we build something, it has to be broken. Why? A discussion to itself. Right now, I'm more interested in the how. It has to be broken. One thing that really came out over this last week, it's hard to believe it was only 1 week ago this whole thing started, right? But the fact that so many people were able to be killed, and it's just unfathomable. I just can't get your head around it. And some people were injured by people who should never be able to do something like that. How can we be caught so by surprise? So this is what creates conspiracy theories. But the reality is you see, so many times we have thwarted potential attacks because if we're meant to know something, God finds a way to tell it to us. And if we're not meant to know something, even if we think that we should be able to know it, we're not going to find out for whatever reason. You can look for the technical reasons after and make this complaint and that complaint and all that, but the reality is that this is what God wanted. This is what God decided because this is what had to happen. Why? No idea. Painful, unbelievably. These are things that God hopefully will answer later on for us. But in the meantime, it's a fact on the ground. This is the reality, and something broke. Not just physically in terms of the people dying and suffering, but even the trust in our ability to defend ourselves, and how many people, wonder about the safety of living in Israel and were shaken up. The amount of fear. I've never seen so much fear in people because of what's going on as today. Not the entire time being here. And that's over 30 years already, at this point in time. Something broke. There's no question. There's a breaking going on. It's still going right now, which means that something's about to be built. The breaking doesn't just happen. It looks like punishment. It's not. It's punishment mixed in, fine, but the Gemara says anyhow, punishment is not even for this world. Punishment comes later on in Gehenna. Things have a punishing effect, for sure, but it's more to do with building something else. And I wish it wasn't this way, and I don't like it this way. And it's and hopefully it will stop, but that's the way it is. That's the way God seems to work. And again, it's divine logic, divine reasoning. We'll have to ask him later on why it has to be that way for everything. But when it comes to things to do with the Jewish people, with creation, with the Messianic era, with the ultimate purpose of my separation is a breaking that takes place, and specifically because something's about to be big. And the bigger the breaking, the bigger the building is going to happen. Now we're holding so late in history this period of time. And even though it sounds so empty, it sounds like so plastic, so to speak, to say, yes, this could easily be the war of Gog and Magog after saying for so long. The reality is that's really what could be happening right now. Because if it was just a terrorist attack where, God forbid, a couple people were killed, it's a price you pay for living in the Middle East. It's a price you pay for living amongst neighbors who hate you and live to kill you. That's going to happen. It's very hard around it. You're dealing with people who do not understand the concept of peace and growing together and higher goals. They had everything they needed to succeed as a people like other nations and come out and be happy and enrich their constituents and get along peacefully with Israel. They had it all. And they keep throwing it away because they just have this mentality they have to get rid of the Jews. They have to have the land. There's no other place in the world like this. So this is what's going to happen in the Middle East. But this, everybody feels it's different. Something else going on here. Something much bigger, leading to something bigger. And that's why so many people have been writing in and asking, is this Gog and Magog? Is this Gog and Magog? Because it feels different. Not like the other thing. Yeah, there was a potential that maybe could lead. No, but it always fizzled out. This thing is not fizzling out. It's not promising to either. And we don't know where it's going to go. And we don't know what's going to drag in. And don't look to figure it out strategically and logically, because that's not the way God works. Not according to our logic. If he wants us to know something, he will share it. But until he does, we don't know. So what do we know? We have what we have. We have our Gemaras. We have Tanakh. We have the prophecies. That was given to us in advance, that we should have some means of preparation for what's coming up next. But we have to get it into our heads, our minds, that all those lessons, all those theoretical lessons about Emunah, they have to become real now. And you cannot damage your muzzle by letting yourself be affected by things that are going to drag you down, because that's ultimately what's going on. Hamas, cover story, just the face, right? When the snake spoke to Chava, everybody learns it was the snake. The snake came in, he's a bad guy, and speaks to Chava, and it was a different type of snake. Those snakes could talk, and they could stand up, and he was clever, and it says he was most a room of all the chayot in the garden. So he was like a guy to avoid, a snake to avoid for sure. But Kabbalah explains, no. The snake, Gemara itself says the snake was meant to be a friend of Adam and Chava, more like a butler than anything else. What happened? Well, Adam already made some mistakes, and because of that, the Sitra Achra, the Satan, he went into the snake. He took over. Now, why? Because snake was built for this. The snake has a certain propensity to be used in this way. It's all part of this master plan of creation. But he went, and now it was the Sitra Achra talking through the snake. So Chava, if she had known this, she was, no, I see a snake, but this is the Sitra Achra, and you have one thing and one thing in mind, and that's to get me to do a sin, do a chet. Nah, I'm not talking to you. She didn't know. She thought she was talking to a snake who she thought was her friend, but it wasn't. It's a Sitra Achra. Same thing, right? If you find that this is depressing you, and it will, if you find this makes you sad, and how could it not? And at the end of the day, you find yourself unmotivated to serve Hashem, unmotivated to learn Torah, distracted from learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, distracted from living up to your potential, distracted from your emunah. If you find yourself being pulled away, that's the stamp of the Sitra Achra that uses all of this to pull us away from the one thing that we don't believe has such an effect, but he knows it does. Tefillah, right? Learning specifically, and mitzvahs, and Gemus Chasadim, and unity, all these things. He comes to destroy it because that's what destroys him. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm waiting to find out, just like the next person. But you cannot but take note of the things happening and what it means. All P, our tradition, all P, the things that we know are the theory behind the Lamaisa. And you have to be ready and not be dragged down. So, having said that, I'm going to, if anybody wants to write in a question right now, I'll take questions. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, first of all, I want to apologize. My introduction got cut off for some reason, but the Rabbi Shiur was intact. The first question comes from Rivka Lambert Adler. She'd like to hear you speak about what happens to the soul of a Jew when he dies al Kiddush Hashem.
It's very specific. Anybody, first of all, even a person who died, a secular Jew who doesn't even necessarily know the Torah is from Sinai, hasn't come to that conclusion yet, but they die as a Jew defending Israel, dies al Kiddush Hashem. And anybody who dies al Kiddush Hashem goes right up to, inside the inner area of Hashem, to the highest levels. I mean, that depends upon the level of Kiddush Hashem, how high they actually go. But it is, I don't want to die. No one wants to die. No one wants to suffer. We'd like to sanctify the name of God by living and doing Torah mitzvahs. As my Rosh Hashiva used to say, that Rav Noach Weinberg used to tell us, to die for God is a one-shot deal, right? It's a great thing. It's a one-shot deal. But to get up every morning to live for God, that's day after day after day after day. That's even better. That's the way we prefer it. But to be able to be Eretz Yisrael, I know it sounds like harsh, but to be in Eretz Yisrael and to die defending the Jewish people, there's not much higher than that. And that, brings tremendous schar in the world to come.
Okay, thank you. From Cookie Maisel, the Holocaust, all the wars in Israel, years of terror, and rockets, COVID, and so many people died. How much more can we take, and how much more can we expect? I know that's not a question you can actually give us a real answer to, but what is your sense?
The answer to that question is only God knows, because he it's like a test. It says you're not allowed to give yourself a spiritual test. In other words, you can't say, let's see how strong I am spiritually, and put yourself in a situation that's going to test your spiritual, backbone, so to speak, because you don't know what you're capable of. Many great people over the course of history have lost it. They thought they could withstand a test. I know people, friends of mine, who got involved in Kiruv. They went back to in the diaspora in Kiruv, and I saw them years later, and they'd lost so much of their Yiddishkeit, making all kinds of compromises, because it's a very big test and it's a very scary test. But God, He knows exactly what we're capable of, and He gives us tests that we can pass. Unless a person's really being arrogant and looking to show the person how arrogant they are. So they will fail, but in general, if a person wants to do the right thing and be on the right track, then God will give them the capacity to be able to pass their test and give them only tests that they can pass. So whatever we go through. Now, the only question mark in all of this that people would have, I would think, after this, because you see some people, good people, who never recover. There are some people who've lost their minds. Even the Gemara talks about rabbis who lost their minds, and because of certain things they did and certain tests they took, that they weren't great, and they one of the greatest epicorsim of all history, Elisha ben Abuya, was a colleague of Rabbi Akiva, and he went into Pardes with Rabbi Akiva, and he was such a great individual, became the quintessential heretic of all history. But you have to understand, there's different tracks to history. There's personal tikkun, in Shari Gilgulim, where the Rizal speaks about reincarnation. He talks about different people and how they had to go through different situations. And in one life, it looked disastrous, but it was really part of the tikkun for previous life. There's so many calculations to take into account. But in general, God will give us what's necessary for us, not necessarily what's comfortable for us. And that's where Emunah comes in, because the only way to survive anything is with Emunah. And when I say Emunah, by the way, I don't just mean blind faith. That's a fantastic thing, and if you can do that, kol hakavod. If you can have blind faith and go to Kosh Baruch Hu and never question, and because you just trust Him implicitly, that is an amazing level to be on, and that's great. When I talk about Emunah, the word Emunah is like the word uman, like a professional. Hashem says that we said on Simchas Torah, Atah hareis ladas. Right, you were shown to know, Ani Hashem Elokim, and Ein Od Milvado. Right, I showed it to you that you should understand that I control everything. So no question marks. I mean, there's nothing that should upset your emunah, meaning that you may not have the answers you're looking for, and they may not come in your lifetime, but you have to understand the answer exists. It's by me. At some point in time, you'll find out, and you'll be rewarded. But you have to trust. We've been very affected in our generation. Like Rabbi Akiva, he understood these things. The great rabbis of the past, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they understood that this world is just a corridor to the next world. They understood that just here, like a technician shows up at your house to fix your fridge. He knows he's not there to stay. He knows he can't just sit down on the sofa, put his feet up, put on, and watch something and read something and have a cup of coffee. It's not his place to do that. He knows I'm here to fix that and to move on. They knew that. We don't. We live in this world like it's the last one. Like there's none after this. So therefore, we have this whole idea of how life should play out. But we're a very fortunate generation up until now. We've had a very good run of exile. Our predecessors did not. Europe was not like this, and neither was the early Roman generation. So we have to understand that God is in control completely. We have to be experts in our understanding that every last detail, no matter how random it looks, is not. God is doing it, and we have to trust Him for the process. And that's not just a thing you just snap into. You have to think about that. You have to contemplate it. You have to meditate on it. You have to talk about it with other people. You have to read the books about it day after day after day after day until it becomes the way you think. And that could be a whole lifetime. We're getting a crash course now. That's what's going on.
Rabbi, I have a question. If you have time, I get a little bit confused of all the, I have so much clear because of the way you describe things through the years. But one thing that I still find a little confusing is that when you were talking about how God is reintroducing himself back into the world, that made a lot of sense. That he's opening people's eyes. You see people who are caring about the Jewish nation who used to turn a blind eye to all kinds of things, and now they're paying attention. I've got messages myself from all over the world, people that I've worked with, all non-Jews, saying we're praying for you. How are you? They didn't care before anything before this. Why are they contacting me now? It's very nice, and I'm happy about it. But my question is, like, if you're saying it's a slow process, I think is what you said. What about that whole concept that it could come at the blink of an eye? I mean, I get too confused. Could you clear that up for me?
Yeah, but the way I understand that is basically, it's like two kids in a car, right? One child is looking at the front window, and one child's looking at the side window, and the one they're both counting telephone poles as they drive by them one after the other, right? The one who's looking forward, he can see all the telephone poles ahead of him, right? So as they go by, he's already he knows them all. But the guy looking at the side window, the child, until they come and they go, just like come and go, just like that, because he's looking at the side window. He doesn't anticipate what's coming up because he can't see what's coming up. He only sees what's going by. So when it says Yeshua Hashem Keref Ayin, like the blinking of eye, that's for the people who had not been paying attention the entire time. For the people who thought that it's just a fairy tale, it's a bunch of religious people believing things from the past that don't make sense anymore, right? And then it all of a sudden shows up. It's going to, wow, just like that, just like what happened last week. But the truth is, what happened last week, if you're in touch with the Gula process and the war of Gog and Magog, you can anticipate it. It's not such a shock. It's a disappointment. It's a painful thing. But it's not a shock. Because something, the same way, for example, the Twin Towers, okay? We spoke about this in 1999. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we said things like, something has to happen to change the way people look at history, to look at living in America. Why? Because we have to get back to Israel at some point in time. People don't want to come. They believe they're safe, in America. And that's not going to change unless something dramatic happens to change it. And it did. And no one thought, wow, it's crazy. How could that be? How they, pull it off and carry it out? But it happened in the end. And it shook the world up, and we never returned back to the way we were before that. It was a major turning point in history that this is all a part of in the end. And it's all to be expected because we understand, just like in a sense, World War I was to get to World War II. World War II was to get to, the founding of the state. Founding the state was to get to the situation today. It's all been an ongoing process. If you've got your finger in the pulse and you're paying attention to it, then it's not going to be, it's in a slow, long process. It's taken decades and years and even centuries to bring about. And when it finally comes to a conclusion, it's not a surprise. But for the people who have not been paying attention, it's going to be like this, just like that.
That's very powerful. Got the wrong buttons. Okay, if you have time for one more question. Yeah, would it be all right? First of all, I just want to tell you regards from Hinda Rich and Abatya Makalis, who I think you might have just answered her question about whether or not we should be shocked about this. And last question by Rivka Adler. What role does din play in what happened on last Shabbat? And is Hashem treating us with din, in your opinion?
Yes, there's no question it's din, but the point of din, din has a bad rap for obvious reasons. When you think about din, you think about judgment and you think about punishment, because usually that's what din leads to. But the whole point of din is to get to truth, right? The main part of din really is to do with a process called bir, separating out the sparks, separating the good from the bad. And you could see how over the last decade alone that things have been happening specifically that have caused people to go one way or the other way. I mean, this whole thing of there are many things that have come as a result of this war. But one thing is for sure, Hamas, that's just laid themselves bare on the table. They just literally showed the whole world. Now they're trying to backtrack and publicize the opposite. But they are now known for what they are actually like. They revealed, we've been telling them the world this for the longest time, and people didn't believe us. And now a lot more people have seen this to be true because it was so outside the box, so unnecessary to do what they did. And yet they went and they did, and they enjoyed it. And this reveals their true nature. So you need din for that. Din is the way that God reveals truth to the world. So yeah, it's a time of din, and it gets rid of some people and some people not. But the main thing it does is it's a vehicle, it's a means for God to bring the truth into reality. If we don't do it ourselves, in other words, if we were to be truth seekers and truth pushers, and the whole world would say, oh, let's find out the truth and live by it, we wouldn't need that because it would already be clear to everybody. But since we're coming off a period of time of such sheker, such falsehood in the world. False news led to false realities, and then false governments. It's like the whole thing has been sheker the entire time. So now you need din to get back to the bare essential truth, and that's all part of the preparation from Mashiach arrival. We have to get back to that reality once again. Okay.
All right, Rabbi, thank you so much for taking your precious time explaining this to us. I missed the introduction. The button didn't press for the recording, but it did go on when you started your shiur, so nobody missed 1 minute of that. Okay. But I just want to repeat that I'm Yehuda Shamroth from Ramat Beit Shemesh. I'm missing my colleague tonight. He might be a rabbi, Josh Wander, who has now been called up on reserves. He's a multitasking person who does everything for Kol Yisrael. He devotes his whole heart and soul. He may be in danger right now, like all the other soldiers. So please pray for his safety and the safety of my children who are in the army, and everybody's children who are in the army, and everybody on the streets, and all of Israel. If you are not part of the community of Israel, if you just love Israel, please make a donation, make a contribution in any way you can, just to help us with everything that's going on right now, from things for soldiers, for things for people in the South who have been kicked out of their homes. You can contact me privately if you want to help in any way. And Rabbi, thank you so much. And everybody should please be safe. And we should bring the Geula Shalema soon. And we should have a very, get some good results from this. It wasn't shocking to us, was it? But it's we know that's coming now, and we were prepared spiritually. Thanks to you, Rabbi. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good Shabbat. Thank you very much.